Amara Okafor stood by her father's grave in Lagos, tears threatening to fall, but she held them back. Her heart ached, not just from the loss of Chike Okafor, a man everyone admired, but from the weight of the moment itself. Friends, family, and colleagues whispered softly around her, sharing the sorrow, trying to offer comfort. She clutched her father's favorite handkerchief, the one he always kept in his pocket, and felt a pang of emptiness that made her chest tighten. Then Emeka, her husband of 5 years, stepped closer. He leaned in with that calm, practiced smile that used to make her feel safe, and handed her a thick stack of papers. Amara blinked, confused at first, thinking maybe it was something about her father's estate or some official funeral matter. But the words hit her like a punch to the stomach. Divorce papers. He was filing for divorce. Here in front of her grieving family at her father's funeral. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some relatives looked shocked, some confused. A few even whispered in judgment. Amara's knees felt weak. The grief, the shock, the humiliation. It all crashed down at once. Her hands trembled as she held the papers, realizing the cruel audacity of the moment. How could someone betray you at the exact moment your heart was breaking? Yet as the tears blurred her vision, a strange fire started to burn inside her. This wasn't just sadness anymore. Somewhere under the grief, a spark of determination flickered. Amara realized, right there among the whispers and the stares, that she wasn't going to be broken. Not by death and certainly not by betrayal. Amara could feel the shock hanging heavy in the air. Her relatives were frozen, staring at the scene as if it weren't real. Her mother, Ngozi Okafor, didn't say a word. Amara could see the conflict in her mother's eyes, mourning her husband's death while also trying to process the embarrassment of Emeka's cruel act. Some cousins whispered among themselves, glancing at Amara with uncertainty. A few even nodded subtly toward Emeka, clearly buying his line about irreconcilable differences. The whispers, the sideways glances, the judgment, it all made Amara feel like she was standing on a stage under harsh lights, and everyone was watching her humiliation. But even in that moment her mind raced. She remembered all the little things Emeka had done, the quiet manipulations that had slowly pushed her into a corner. The way he had belittled her ideas in meetings, the way he spread subtle lies about her to friends, the way he isolated her from her own family under the guise of protecting her. He had built a mask of the devoted husband and she had trusted it, until now. It wasn't just betrayal. It was public, calculated, and cruel. Emeka had chosen this moment, the moment when her heart was broken, to humiliate her in front of everyone she loved. Amara could feel the sting of anger rising alongside the grief. The fire that had flickered during the funeral now burned brighter. Every insult, every smirk from the cousins siding with him, only made her focus sharper. She realized something important. This wasn't just about her marriage. It was about her dignity, her reputation, and her life. And if Emeka thought he could destroy her with this one act, he had another thing coming. Amara's heart pounded, a mix of sorrow and determination. She wasn't going to let him, or anyone else, define her story. Not now, not ever. Before all this heartbreak, Amara remembered how perfect it had seemed. Their wedding in Abuja had been like a dream. Lavish flowers, sparkling lights, and hundreds of guests cheering them on. Emeka had smiled at her like she was the only woman in the world, and for a while she had believed it. Social media had loved them too. Every photo, every video carefully curated to show the perfect couple, the perfect life. Friends had envied them. Family had been proud. And Amara had thrown herself into it all with love and excitement. But slowly cracks began to show. The first time Emeka dismissed one of her ideas in a meeting, she brushed it off. Then came the controlling comments about what she wore, whom she talked to, and even how she spent her time. At first she told herself she was overthinking it. He was her husband, he cared, maybe it was just stress. But then the subtle financial manipulations started. He questioned her spending, monitored her bank accounts, and tried to convince her to give up shares in her own business. Little by little he isolated her, making her feel dependent on him while pretending he was the devoted partner. Amara had ignored many red flags because she wanted to believe in the love she had felt on that wedding day. She had been loyal, trusting, and patient, thinking that love could smooth over the rough edges. But deep down she always had a gnawing feeling that something was wrong. Seeing those divorce papers at her father's funeral confirmed every fear she had tried to ignore. It wasn't about irreconcilable differences, as he had claimed. It was about control. Emeka had never truly loved her as an equal partner. He had only wanted a wife he could manipulate, a prize to show off, and a person he could dominate. The realization stung, but it also lit a spark inside her. For the first time she saw the truth clearly. She hadn't failed in love. She had been betrayed by someone who never deserved her trust, her heart, or her time. And now she knew it was time to stop being the victim. Later that night, Amara sat alone in her father's house. The funeral had ended, the guests had left, and silence hung over the rooms like a heavy blanket. She held the divorce papers in her hands, staring at them, feeling the weight of Emeka's betrayal all over again. For a moment, sadness washed over her, grief, anger, humiliation, but then something shifted. She realized that these papers didn't have to be a symbol of defeat. They could be her weapon. Every line, every clause could be used strategically. Signing them didn't mean surrender. It could mean control. A plan started forming in her mind, quiet at first, but growing sharper with each passing minute. She could turn Emeka's arrogance against him. He had always underestimated her intelligence, her independence, and her ability to think ahead. That had been his biggest mistake. Amara looked around the room that had belonged to her father. Memories of his guidance, his strength, and his wisdom filled her heart, and she felt a surge of confidence. She was his daughter, strong, capable, and smart. The estate he had left her gave her leverage. Businesses, properties, and financial assets that Emeka had assumed he could control. But now she saw the real power they gave her. For the first time since the funeral, grief took a back seat to determination. Amara's mind raced with possibilities. She could play this carefully, make every move count, and not only protect herself but also make sure Emeka realized just how wrong he had been. The thought made her lips curve into a small, determined smile. This was the moment she stopped being just the hurt wife in everyone's eyes. This was the moment she became a strategist, a woman ready to reclaim her dignity and her life. The fire that had flickered during the funeral now roared. Grief had brought her to the edge, but clarity and resolve were pulling her forward. Amara knew one thing for certain. She would rise, and she would do it on her own terms. The next day, Amara reached out to Tay Adeyemi, her childhood friend and one of the sharpest lawyers she knew in Lagos. Tay had always been brilliant, with a mind for strategy and an instinct for spotting weaknesses. Seeing her friend now, disheveled from grief but burning with quiet determination, he didn't waste time on sympathy. Instead, he listened carefully as she explained everything. Emeka's betrayal, the divorce papers, the humiliation at the funeral. Together they began to craft a plan. They would sign the papers, yes, but on Amara's terms. She would protect every asset, secure her shares in the family business, and safeguard her reputation. Nothing would slip through Emeka's fingers this time. Every clause, every signature would be a calculated move. Tay made notes, highlighting where Emeka's arrogance had left him vulnerable, and where the law could tip the scales in Amara's favor. Amara also started digging. She collected evidence of Emeka's manipulations. Bank statements showing hidden accounts, emails revealing lies, subtle attempts to sabotage her business deals. She even combed through public records, social media interactions, and contracts he had thought she wouldn't notice. Piece by piece, the picture of Emeka's deceit became clear and undeniable. As she worked, something incredible happened. The terrified, shocked bride she had been at her father's funeral began to disappear. In her place emerged a woman focused, intelligent, and unstoppable. Every meeting with Tay, every piece of evidence gathered, sharpened her resolve. She realized this wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming control, showing Emeka and everyone else that she was more than a victim. By the end of the week, Amara's plan was taking shape. The divorce papers would be signed, but this time she would walk away not humiliated but powerful. She wasn't just reacting anymore. She was leading the game. And deep down she knew that when the right moment came, the world would see the full extent of Emeka's betrayal and her brilliance. A week later, Amara walked into Emeka's corporate event in Lagos, every eye turning as she entered. She wore a sleek, elegant dress, her hair perfectly styled, and a calm, confident smile that hid the storm of planning and patience behind it. To everyone else, it looked like she was there to reconcile with her husband, to smooth over the tension from recent events. But inside, Amara was focused and ready. As she moved through the room, shaking hands and exchanging polite smiles, she began dropping small, calculated hints about what she knew. A casual question here about a business deal he had mismanaged. A friendly comment there about colleagues who had been misled by his promises. She spoke as if she were curious, kind, and generous. But every word was a seed planted, a subtle revelation of Emeka's lies and manipulations. People started noticing little cracks in Emeka's polished image. Whispers began circulating. Stories about deals gone wrong, hidden bank accounts, attempts to sabotage Amara's career. Colleagues and mutual acquaintances exchanged glances, piecing together the truth from her carefully chosen words. By the end of the night, what had begun as private murmurs had grown into full-blown gossip. Lagos social circles buzzed with the news, sharing messages, screenshots, and side conversations that painted Emeka as deceitful and controlling. And all the while, Amara remained composed, elegant, and untouchable. Her calm presence and subtle strategy made her revelations even more powerful. People believed her because she wasn't angry or defensive. She was collected, deliberate, and in control. Every whisper of gossip worked in her favor, slowly dismantling Emeka's reputation without her ever raising her voice. By the time the event ended, Amara had turned the tables. She had transformed from the humiliated wife at her father's funeral into a woman commanding attention and respect. The first wave of her public revenge was complete, and she could feel the power shift in the room. For the first time since that shocking day, she smiled, not with sadness but with satisfaction. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was winning. The day finally came when Amara was ready to sign the divorce papers. But this time she wasn't trembling, confused, or defeated. She had spent weeks planning, gathering evidence, and working with Tay to make sure every move counted. These papers, once a symbol of betrayal and humiliation, were now tools of her empowerment. She read through the documents carefully, clause by clause, making sure every detail protected her. She kept control of the company shares her father had left her, secured all joint accounts, and ensured Emeka couldn't touch a single property she had inherited or invested in. Where he thought he could take from her, she had already made sure he would gain nothing. Emeka's arrogance had blinded him to her intelligence, and now he would pay the price. When she finally signed, she did so with calm confidence. There was no shaking hand, no angry outburst, just quiet power. Emeka sat across from her, probably expecting tears, drama, or a plea. Instead, he met a poised, elegant woman who walked out of that room carrying her dignity like armor. Word of the finalized divorce spread quickly through Lagos, not through gossip or scandal, but because Amara had handled it with grace. She became a symbol of strength and intelligence. People admired her for not letting betrayal define her, for turning a painful, humiliating moment into a public demonstration of resilience. Emeka, on the other hand, was left to face the consequences of his choices. His attempts to control her, his lies and manipulations, all of it had crumbled. Financially, he gained nothing. Socially, he had lost respect among colleagues, friends, and family. The same man who had tried to humiliate her at her father's funeral now had to watch as she walked away stronger, smarter, and untouchable. For Amara, this was more than a divorce. It was proof that revenge didn't need to be loud, angry, or destructive. True power came from strategy, intelligence, and keeping your dignity intact. As she stepped into the next chapter of her life, she knew one thing. She hadn't just survived betrayal. She had turned it into her triumph. After the divorce, the reaction was immediate, but not the way Emeka had hoped. Amara's friends, many of whom had stayed quiet while he tried to isolate her, finally spoke up. They sent messages, shared stories of her strength, and openly praised her intelligence and composure. For years they had watched Emeka manipulate situations, control conversations, and try to make Amara doubt herself. Now they were free to celebrate her. Her father's former business partners stepped forward too. Publicly, they praised Amara for taking the reins of the family company with confidence and skill. Interviews, social media shout-outs, and casual mentions at corporate events highlighted her leadership and acumen. People who had once questioned her ability to run the business now admired her for not only stepping in but excelling. Amara herself had been careful, never bragging, never seeming vengeful. She let her results speak. Social media quickly picked up on her story. Posts about her calm strength, smart decisions, and graceful handling of the divorce began trending. Lagos online communities celebrated her, sharing snippets of her journey from grief and humiliation to empowerment. Messages poured in from strangers praising her dignity, resilience, and intelligence. This was more than just personal revenge. It was public and symbolic. People weren't just admiring her. They were learning from her. Amara had turned a painful, humiliating moment into a story of inspiration. She had shown that betrayal and loss didn't have to destroy someone. They could be the beginning of a comeback stronger than anyone had expected. As she scrolled through the congratulatory messages and watched the coverage spreading across social media, Amara smiled. She realized her revenge wasn't about anger or resentment. It was about proving to Emika, to the world and to herself, that she could rise above betrayal with intelligence, grace, and courage. She hadn't just reclaimed her life, she had rewritten her story on her own terms, and everyone could see it. Emika had always thought he was clever. At the funeral, he had believed he could humiliate Amara in front of everyone, friends, family, and business colleagues alike. For a moment he had felt powerful, smug, untouchable. But as the days passed, reality hit him like a wave he hadn't seen coming. His attempts to smear Amara, to twist the story and make himself look like the victim, failed spectacularly. Colleagues he had thought he could influence quietly sided with Amara. Friends who had been pressured by him now spoke openly about her strength and intelligence. Even family members who had initially wavered began to see the truth. Emika's arrogance had been his downfall. Socially he began to lose respect. Invitations dwindled, conversations carried awkward silence when he entered the room, and gossip no longer painted him as the clever manipulator. It painted him as petty and weak. Every attempt to regain control only highlighted his failure. The same man who had tried to break Amara's spirit at her father's funeral now looked small in comparison to the woman he had underestimated. Professionally, the damage was just as clear. Deals he had tried to influence or sabotage in secret were now exposed. Partners and clients began questioning his judgment and integrity. Amara's calm, measured, and strategic actions had turned the tables completely. She hadn't shouted, argued, or lost her cool. She had acted with precision, letting her intelligence and composure speak louder than any words. And at the funeral itself, the place where he had intended to humiliate her, Emika had become the figure of pity. People remembered his smugness, then saw the contrast with Amara's grace, dignity, and strength. The irony was sharp, almost poetic. Amara didn't need revenge through anger or drama. Her calm, strategic approach had done more damage than any outburst could have. By keeping her moral high ground, she ensured that everyone could see the truth. She was the one who had risen and he was the one who had fallen. Her victory wasn't loud or messy. It was perfect, deliberate, and undeniable. Months after the divorce, Amara's life had completely transformed. She was no longer just Chaik Okafor's daughter or Emika's betrayed wife. She had become her own person, in full control of her destiny. The family business, which had once been a source of stress and manipulation, now thrived under her leadership. Amara made smart decisions, expanded operations, and brought in innovative projects that left competitors impressed and partners inspired. But success wasn't just in business. Amara had found happiness outside Emika's shadow. She surrounded herself with friends and allies who genuinely cared for her, people who celebrated her strengths instead of undermining them. She laughed more, traveled when she wanted, and discovered passions she had set aside during years of compromise. The divorce papers that had once crushed her now felt like proof of her resilience. They weren't a symbol of defeat, but a reminder of how far she had come. Across Lagos and even beyond, people admired her. Social media buzzed with stories of her courage and intelligence. Colleagues and industry leaders praised her strategic mind. Friends and strangers alike looked to her as an example of dignity, strength, and empowerment. She had turned betrayal into an opportunity, humiliation into a platform, and pain into power. As she sat in her office one quiet evening, looking out over the city lights, Amara reflected on everything she had endured. True revenge, she realized, wasn't about hurting someone else. It wasn't about anger or drama. Real revenge was rising stronger, smarter, and more confident than those who doubted you. And in that moment she knew she had won. Not just over Emika but over every challenge that had ever tried to hold her back.